Hi boys and girls, Miss Cabrera here. Today I want to share one of my absolute favorite books with you. It is called Rosie Revere Engineer. I absolutely love this book and I hope you do too. Rosie Revere Engineer by Andrea Beatty, illustrated by David Roberts. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. This is little Rosie right here, the blonde hair in her classroom. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer's stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. Alone in her attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. This is one of my favorite pages because there's just so much to look at. All of these cool inventions she has in her room. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye. She made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser and helium pants. That's pretty funny. The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head. From parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. Look at that down there. A python is a type of snake. Look at all these snakes. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud. But Fred slapped his knee and chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed, his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. "I love it," Fred hooted. "Oh, truly I do." But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day kept her dreams to herself. And that's how it went until one autumn day. Her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of the things she had done and goals she had checked off her list one by one. She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. "The only thrill left on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems. I'll chalk that one up to an old lady's dream." That night, as Rosie laid wide-eyed in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, "No, not I." But questions are tricky, and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone. then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. So her invention is under this big sheet that she has, that she's rolling out. Let's see what it looks like. Strapped into the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The Helio cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round, then froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see the old woman laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, "Oh no, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin, or build with a lever, a switch, or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer." She turned round to leave, but then great Aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close. And hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. "You did it! Hooray! It's the perfect first try. This great flop is over. It's time for the next." Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed. "I failed," said dear Rosie. "It's just made of trash. Didn't you see? The cheese copter crashed." But first it did what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy and on to the next. She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Aunt Rosie tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere. The end. Oh, it's so good. Look at this part. This is one of my favorite parts in the book because Rosie, who was initially discouraged when making her inventions, was later realized that just because she made a mistake doesn't mean it was a failure. It was her first try. And she just kept going, and that's what I think is so important about this book and so cool. And now Rosie's the one really encouraging her friends to come up with cool inventions and come up with cool ideas and do anything that they have in their head. One really cool part about this book is this historical note. So the book is referencing Rosie the Riveter, and they're going to touch on that a little bit. So I'm going to read that now. During World War II, millions of women in the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the Soviet Union, and other allied nations worked to provide the food and equipment needed for the war effort. Some worked on farms to grow food for our troops. Others built ships, airplanes, tanks, and jeeps. With the help of many women, American factories produced more than 300,000 aircrafts, 86,000 tanks, and 2 million army trucks during the war. In the United States, these women were represented by Rosie the Riveter, the scarf-wearing fictional character whose slogan was, "We can do it." And did anyone notice that the slogan was in that book, in the book? Let me go back to one of the illustrations. Oh, right here, when Rosie and her great aunt are working, look, it says, "We can do it," right here. So think about another thing that's so great about this book, going right back to the beginning, Rosie was pulling things out of the recycle bin, pulling things out to work and build with unconventional materials. So she's using, empty containers and boxes. And if we look here, there's tons of cool things. There's, rulers and rolls of tape and a paper towel tube, a really long fork. And she's just taking these ideas out of her head and finding things around her house that she can put these ideas out into the world then. So what I want you to do is think of a cool invention or something really neat that you can build, and then look around your house and see what you can find to put it together. You don't have to buy anything. Look for, pillowcases and boxes and cords and anything that you can use to make your idea a reality. And I would love to see what you come up with.